The 10th King Johnson of the Joseon dynasty in Korea was deposed and replaced by Yeongjong in 1506. Those who assisted him in his climb to power, however, turn on him and unleash chaos on the country. A group of people are brutally put to death by guards who are afraid they have the plague as the situation spirals out of control. However, one mother survives the tragedy by rescuing her child. The girl loses her mother, yet in the face of complete isolation, a guardian figure comes to her aid. The Prime Minister addresses the people of China at a temple, warning them that a weird beast has recently appeared on MIT. Wangs and is preying on humans. The monstrous beast is called Monster. The royal family has been asked to stop spreading untrue allegations about it. Yeongjong addresses the Prime Minister, accusing him of spreading the allegation to get rid of him by putting pressure on the locals. The minister tells him he needs to examine his conduct because he is the one responsible for the monster's existence. The king, amazed by his newfound fluency, announces his intention to hire an honest person to look into the allegations and disprove them. Sung Han and his brother Young Kim, two inept hunters, fight in the woods over whether or not the beast exists. Myung, Sung Han's niece, discovers them after they've fallen into his trap and laughs at her uncle's stupidity. The three friends spend their days silently hunting and fishing, barely able to provide for themselves. Even though Myung suggests going all the way to Hanyang town, Young Kim insists that they are fine with the way they are. She heads out to the fields to work, but is startled when a stranger approaches, demanding to speak with the former head of the royal guard. Young is a puzzle. She takes aim at the man with her bow and arrow, telling him that nobody who looks like him could possibly live there. When Sung Han unexpectedly shows up, she fires the arrow at the stranger, who simply turns around and is unharmed. Myung meets a charming young man and quickly falls in love with him. The young man calls himself an officer and identifies himself as Kim, suggesting that he and Han were previously prominent military figures. She reflects on their glorious history of martial prowess. Myung, however, is skeptical about this account. Everyone is taken aback when the king himself makes an unexpected appearance. He tells young Kyum that young Kim was the soldier who picked up Myung when he was a child because Kim disapproved of the king's homicidal practice. The king's loyalists were certain that the girl was infected with the creature's illness and should be killed. Kuma, who is still a young man, says that the plague is spread merely through eye contact. But after him, people who are unmoved by the girl automatically think that everything is an elaborate hoax and that innocent lives were lost for no reason. The guards turn on him, seeing him as a traitor and taking up arms. The king, however, hesitates to actually assault him. And Han, the king's son, seems to reassure the monarch that his siblings' motivations are good. The monarch spares their lives out of regret, but gives strict orders that they never return. In the present, Yoon Kyum lends his sword and takes the lead with his brother and the girl. The talk of the creature is becoming worrisome, so King Yeongjong promises the former commander his sword if he will return. After sleeping on it for the night, Kuma Young is thrilled when he learns that Young is willing to travel with him all the way to Hanyang. Brother attempts to talk him out of it, but he's made up his mind. Sung Han, in his role as second in command, is obligated to go along. Young, in his usual upbeat manner, decides to tag along on their trip, much to their annoyance. In the forest, shamans perform a rite to beg the creature's forgiveness. However, a young woman in Hanyang who was ready to steal from them saw the monster kill them. Myung is dismayed by the gloom and despair he finds in the nation's capital. During lunch, she, as he refers to the group, discovers a crime scene in the woods and shocks everyone, even though their only witness is a thieving girl who claims everything happened because of a monster. He shows her the shaman's remains anyhow. Human youth view her with suspicion, so he tags along with Sung Han and follows her. When the girl meets a stranger, the two part ways, while Sung Han is unable to locate the individual. Knowing that the girl is lying, Yoon Kyum pursues her. She claims the strange man was to blame for everything, but the monster is still a threat because nobody ventures up the mountain anymore to look for supplies because they are afraid of being attacked. Before they can ask him any questions, the party is interrupted by a man covered in sores who causes a stir in the hamlet by claiming the beast assaulted him and his men. In front of everyone, the man passes away. When Sung Han, a young woman, went back to the shaman scene, she found a shaman perched high in the trees and she wondered how it got there. Meanwhile, she and Myung are looking into the swordsman's death. The girl doesn't appear to be too shaken up by it, and this is something that inspires confidence in her. She describes how, when housebound with boredom, she read voraciously in order to prepare herself for a career as a physician. Young's sudden assignment to find a as her new job left the young man perplexed. It was a human being, as young Kuma informs the king. The sole dissenter was the man who claimed to have seen Monster, leading to questions about his credibility and possible link to the pandemic. While the king is certain that this is all a conspiracy to topple him, he demonstrates the deadly nature of the epidemic by showing that a sample of the man's blood was transfused into a rat, which perished within half a day. The young commissioners in the monster room pose a genuine threat to the public and must uncover the truth. The king's council suggests sending the tiger hunters to Mount Wang's, and while he agrees, he only requests 100 of the available 700 warriors. More than a few people are taken aback when young Kum, the new search commander, shows up dressed as a soldier. The army starts to gather supplies in the city, but they have a hard time doing so because of the poor peasants who can't afford to buy food elsewhere. If they don't have enough, they'll be forced to serve as temporary soldiers, which is a huge burden given their lack of combat experience. Sung Han encounters two young men who say they are the breadwinners of their family, and, after providing them with food, he forces them to leave. In order to execute his civic duty, young Kaim refuses to take back the expulsion of an elderly man. Not without much reluctance. Sung Han looks at the group of soldiers and spots a spy among them. Mayung, who thinks she can hold her own in a battle, disguised herself as a guy to avoid detection. Before he continues, young Kuim warns her that their objective is not a game. The Prime Minister and Jin Yong, head of the Tiger Hunters, had been expected to arrive shortly. They begin their investigation and find nothing. Debating whether to try again later, Kume, the youngest of the group, suggests doing so at night because he has heard that the creature is more active then. As the hunters and villagers dispersed to cover more ground individually, Sung Han noticed that the old guy had wandered off. The other members of his group, including young Kum, her, and Mayung, eventually find him in the middle of a rock wall. This group has recently shown interest in the location. She was so young when her mother died that she had no recollection of the location where young Kume found her and saved her. If she has been there previously, she only wants to know if her father will confirm it for her. The wall of rock is discovered to be preceded by the imprint of a gigantic beast. In another scene, the villagers are leading a march to meet the tiger hunters when the hunters turn on them in a nasty surprise attack and abduct the peasants. They intend to lure young Kim and his companions into a trap by lighting a false flare just as he descends the cliff in search of the monster. As the enemy's assault begins, it becomes more difficult to aid you while also killing her. And Young fought back successfully, even getting Young to come up during the conflict so that you could finish them off. There are now only the 4 primary characters left. While he and Sung Han deal with the remaining hunters, Yoon Keom instructs Mayung and her to notify the king. Both men battle valiantly, but Sang Han steps in just as the commander is about to be shot with an arrow to save them, accepting a punch to the arm. The adversary has both of them cornered and has seized them. To eliminate the king's supporters and army, Jin Yong arrives and admits that the monster doesn't exist. The hunters capture both Mayung and her, and they are tied together. Mayung's mind suddenly flashes back to when she was a child, and she realizes that Jin Yong was the one who murdered her mother. He also recalls her from their time together as kids. But before he can finish, he throws her and her off the cliff, infuriating Yong, who then makes a vengeful oath to Jin Yong. The young couple survived their fall by clinging to a rock, but there was no way for them to escape unharmed. To cover his tracks after ordering the massacre of entire village, Jin Yong fires off another flare to draw the attention of the king of the beast. An animal like a lion emerges from the cliff and is hit with multiple arrows at once. Nonetheless, it shows no signs of flinching. It charges headfirst into battle and wipes out every opponent. Some young and attractive Q got away and decided to go back and save the others. At the cliff's edge, they discover them. The bodies of the beast's prey litter the floor of his lair. They decide to go warn the king, but on their way out, they run into an elderly man who advises them to cover their senses with goo from the nest so as to remain undetected, as the beast has poor eyesight but great hearing. Therefore, everyone is silent. They manage to dodge the monster, at least until young Kyum orders everyone to run via the subterranean tunnels. The beast stops pursuing them, and they tumble into a river. Jinyong returns to the base and informs the Prime Minister that the monster is genuine, despite the Prime Minister's assurances that this was always his goal. He gives the command to topple the monarch by having all the tiger hunters march on the city and set it on fire. A few injured villagers make it to the city and spread the word that their town has been attacked by monsters. It seems that Jinyong is responsible for starting the fire, which quickly grows out of control. Following the old man's directions, the trio finds themselves in the royal palace's sewer system. The group then travels to Joseon Hall, a massive detention facility. The late King Johnson, he says, had a soft spot for unusual animals. As a result, he had to keep them imprisoned. He says he fed animals for the monarch and that he's known monsters since it was a cube. Sparkles was the original name for it because of its shiny eyes. Sparkles was the last monster left when Johnson was deposed. The old man freed him and sent him down the drain, where he grew to monstrous proportions by feasting on spoiled food. When the monster suddenly arrives in the living room, everyone is taken aback, but the old man stays behind to distract the creature and remind it of its former glory. Using an old rattle, he lures it into a cage, where he promptly locks himself and the animal to prevent them from escaping, choosing to take the fury of the beast on himself. The Prime Minister has issued an order for the tiger hunters to destroy all evidence of the disease by setting fire to the area, and it is widely believed that the monarch has no more allies within the city itself. Despite knowing the monster is underneath them, the core group makes it to the royal palace. This necessitates a royal alarm. Even though young Kyum does this behind closed doors, the Prime Minister still manages to ambush them and shoot the king in the leg with an arrow. The royal guard has been wiped out, young Kuma has surrounded his allies, and the beast is on its way. The monster breaks inside the royal hall, killing the hunters there, including Jinyong, allowing the king and young Kuma to make a break for it. By acting like they had the plague, Sunghan and Young were able to sneak out. They set out to find Kyum, the kid. The monster breaks free of the royal temple and systematically slaughters the guards. They use ropes and hooks to restrain it, despite their best attempts, while young Kyu finds the royal guard and orders them to bring the king to safety. Instead of killing the monster, the minister plans to utilize it to scare the populace and usurp power. At a group meeting, young Kyu and his companions settle on a strategy to destroy the monster using explosives, and the Trojan Hall. The Prime Minister flees as his troops are killed as the beast escapes and begins its attack. The villagers try to enter palace grounds, but the residents warn them not to because of the monster waiting within. In an effort to contain the beast, they attempt to seal up exits. However, at this precise moment, the Prime Minister's anger at such malice becomes apparent. The people, however, see through the minister's treachery and turn against him, imprisoning him in the palace. After being chased by the monster, the Prime Minister decides to show the people what they've been missing by running to the top of the wall. He tries to reason with the monster, but the beast ultimately attacks and eats him. The monster is knocked to the ground after what seems like a well-aimed arrow from young Kuma. Keeping the old man's advice in mind, using its sense of hearing, young Kuma aids the beast to the main hall. While that is going on, Sunghan and her stalk the area with explosives for the confrontation. When Jinyong shows up again and starts fighting, things get sticky. After narrowly escaping the beast attacks, young Kyum and Young finally meet at the royal temple's entrance. He orders her indoors so that he can lure the monster inside. They're losing the battle between Sunghan and her. Young finishes up, and Sunghan follows in her tracks, getting sliced by the sword but still charging the foe. Mayung enters the room and takes aim at Jinyong, but the latter protects himself with her. The girl takes the hint, telling him to think back to the day they first met, and the boy just escapes the arrow. Jinyong admits to Mayung that he'll never forget the first time they met. She tells her dad that the bomb is set and ready to go off. To bring down the monster, the commander makes one final dash before leaping into the Joseon Hall while dangling from a rope. The Han's son is the fire, and everyone is running away just in time. The beast puts out the fire in the foos. The young Jun exerts himself to the point of being imprisoned within. His only parting words from his brother are instructions for Soon Hand to look after his sister. Even after taking damage from the beast, young Kyum is able to go to his weapons. He is well aware of his eventual demise. Myung realizes her father is missing, and it all goes off the rails when she demands that someone go get him. The fires are put out by the downpour, and there in the ruins the beast sleeps its last. The king is moved by the soldiers' bravery, and the people of the village begin to return home in mourning. Myeon, however, persists in her quest and eventually locates her injured father among the debris. Everyone pitches in to break him out of his concrete cell, and they cheer because the monster is finally gone. In the epilogue, it is revealed that the monarch temporarily relocated his palace, only to return 3 years later. The two of them, Myung and Time, pass. The royal warriors have now separated a couple on a human baby. The latter inquires as to how young Kim survived the temple explosion, and a flashback reveals that a pulley system elevated him into the air at the last possible moment before the explosion.